was talking to Frank.
There.
Oh.
Okay, I know what you're thinking, so let's just get it out of the way now. Ho, 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 Merry Christmas! And now we'll get to the magic. My story. And that's why they call it a magic marker. Now, I'm a storyteller by trade and a magician by choice, and I'd like to share a little story with you here. But before I do that, no, not yet, not yet. I need my hat. The story begins when the hat goes on. I'd like to tell you a story about my great-great-grandmother. When she was growing up, and I was told this story when I was only knee-high to a grasshopper. My family lived in a little tiny farm in the townville of Ratbridge, County Kildare, just on the edge of the bog of Allen. Now, they were not rich folks, to be sure. Oh, they used to raise some potatoes and carrots, just enough to keep the wolves from the door, but no more. Well, one night, on the light of the blood moon, we were visited by an agile little leprechaun by the name of Quentin. Now, Quentin was a surly old curmudgeon who was far too fond of his drink and had a massive hangover to prove it. So, in the wee hours of the bone-chilling morn, he entered the farmhouse, fully intent on being up and about long before the sleeping family could sleep and find him there. Well, when he entered the steel-glowing fireplace hearth, he saw the ancient armchair. Now, crawled up upon it, and scratching himself among all the poke and springs, he made himself quite comfortable and fell fast asleep. Well, when dawn came, the old woman of the house, that would be my great-great-grandmother, she got up and went to get dressed. She shivered and got dressed and hurried down to the parlor because she needed to rekindle the fire to start breakfast for the still sleeping family. Well, when she got down to the parlor, she noticed the leprechaun still sleeping on the armchair. Thinking quickly, she grabbed a piece of darning thread and putting a needle to it, began to sew his breeches to the cover of the armchair. Now, this is not a good predicament for a fine-standing leprechaun to be in. When he awoke, he saw the grinning old woman standing over him. "Undo me, you old hag," he said. said. I am no longer a pot of gold, and I have nothing of value. But if you free me, I will grant you one wish and give you the answer to one question. Well, a smile came across my grandmother's face as she thought of uncountable wealth. She took a scissor and cut the thread. And she smiled as Quentin began to break the strings into small, tiny, useless pieces. But then the smile of my grandmother turned into a frown as she realized that this was her last piece of darning thread. And she needed to sew her husband's shirt, and she wasn't going to town for another week. As if reading her mind, Quentin took the threads, bundled them up into a little ball, and took them and hung them on a thread and waved it teasingly and tauntingly in front of the old woman's face. When she couldn't stand it anymore, she says, "I wish you hadn't torn my last piece of darning thread." Quentin stood up, said, "Madam, your wish has been granted." And then thunderstruck about what she had said, she says, "Do you tell me that's my only wish?" Quentin bowed and said, "Indeed, ma'am, and that would be the answer to your last question." She lunged for the leprechaun with a scream that would have woken a banshee. But with the skill that belies his age, Quentin leaped to the door and in 3 strides made it to the front door, opened it, and with a wink, left out into the early morning Irish fog, never to be seen again. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the true story of Quentin the Leprechaun. I'd like to share another story with you now. This is a story that my grandfather told me years ago when I was just a young man. My grandfather was an amazing person. He could take a story, add a touch of magic, maybe a little bit of history, and he would create a memory that would be so alive and so vivid that I would remember it to this very day. This is one of his favorite stories. He used to talk about a time long ago when the United States of America was not as big as it is today. As a matter of fact, the United States of America could be compared to a single sheet of newspaper. Not very strong, kind of weak in some places, but overall it was a pretty solid country. Well, one thing that made our country strong then and makes it strong now is our freedom of speech. But you see, the freedom of speech has its disadvantage as well. For the instant I say something, you've got the right to disagree with me. Disagreements can lead to arguments. Arguments can lead to protests. Protests can lead to demonstrations. And in the worst case, a war. And that's what happened in the spring of 1861. The United States of America was torn apart by a terrible civil war, dividing our country into 2 halves, the North and the South. Now the 2 began to battle, but the Civil War wasn't over people, it wasn't over land, it wasn't over property. No, the Civil War was over ideas. Who should make the laws in our country? Should it be the state government? Should it be the federal government? Why, the issues ran so deep that they actually divided families. Father fought against son, mother against daughter, brother against brother. Now the 2 began to battle, and the South had a plan. If they could somehow cut off all the waterways and all the highways and all the roads to Washington, D.C., then maybe, just maybe, they could cut off the supplies to the north and win the war. Well, the problem with their plan was that the North had the same plan. And so the war continued. Soon the things that people took for granted, like shoelaces and string, eyeglasses, medicine, toys, books, clothing, while the supplies that we once had in abundance were now growing smaller and smaller and smaller. Soon the United States of America became such a divided and fragmented mess that no one knew how we were ever going to form a strong union again. But you see, the American people are a unique bunch of people. They're able to make laws that compromise. They're able to make laws that tolerate. They're able to make laws that attempt to be fair to all. But that was a hard lesson for us to learn. For once we did learn the lesson, however, the healing process began. And after 4 long, bloody years and thousands of lives, the United States of America became one